Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Hyperconscious Podcast. Alan, what is hyperconscious?
Once you understand why something is the way that it is, now you have the power to change it. Great conversations with great people and great questions are the keys to the kingdom of unlocking your consciousness.
Every single action that you do starts as a thought. When you control the way you think, you will control the way you act, and you will control the way you live. That is hyperconscious. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another very special, as always, episode of the Hyperconscious Podcast. Today, Alan and I were lucky enough to sit down with Mr. Devan Kline. He is the creator and CEO of BurnBootCamp. He's an author, a speaker, a podcaster, and a next-level human being.
Thank you again, Amy, for suggesting this dream guest. It went amazingly. At one point, Devan was chasing his dreams to be in professional baseball, and he was cut from the team, and he went deep into that story and how he had $600 in his bank account, didn't know what he was going to do, but decided to chase his other dream and grew that $600 to a $100 million business. So anything is possible. Very awesome person, super into personal development.
If you lack belief, Devan talked a lot about that and how he installs belief in people. So if you do lack belief, this is a great episode for you.
Yep. Talk to you soon.
Bye. No. Geographically? Geographically. This is cool. So I would say make sure that pretty face is shown.
Yes, true.
They're going to want to see that thing. They're going to want to see that thing, Alan. That face. You good? Ready? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another very special, as always, episode of the Hyperconscious Podcast. Today's guest is the creator and CEO of BurnBootCamp. He is an author, a speaker, and a podcaster just like us. We are sitting down with Mr. Devan Kline. How are you doing, brother?
Dudes, I'm fantastic. Thank you guys for having me so much, and love what you guys are doing for the community and for the world. And I think your name, Hyperconscious, is super dope too, by the way.
Appreciate you very
Appreciate
much.
the love. I didn't know what it meant when I came up with a name, but the more we sit down and the more we get to chat with people who, you know, are out there chasing their dreams and becoming uber successful, it makes me realize that we have this one shot at life, and if you ask the right questions and you give the right answers, you can really change your life. So that is what Hyperconscious is.
Couldn't agree with you more. I love it.
So I guess just for context, you have a very successful business now. You are a speaker and author, but it wasn't always that way. And one of the things that resonated most about you with me is your upbringing in your childhood. And we love to go deep, and we really want to pull back the curtain on what made you the man you are today. So can you bring us back to what your childhood was like, to what a day in the life of Devan was when he was a kid?
Yeah, to frame that up, I think a lot of people they have this significant event in their life, or maybe it's one or two things that they go through and that changes them. Whether it be a business that they really wanted that failed, that they refused to let fail again, or a miscarriage if you're a parent, some type of event in your life that's significant usually happens to create this change. And I think for me, it was more global than that, and it was at a really young age. And so when I grew up in Battle Creek, Michigan, a couple blocks away from the projects, my father was in and out of prison. My whole upbringing, my mother and him were both alcoholics, addicted to violence, not only with each other, but on their children as well. And my father was a good guy at heart, just when he got the bottle to his lips and the drugs to the nose, it wasn't a great recipe to be a father and be a role model. And so I in Battle Creek, Michigan is where I lived, and I met my wife Morgan when I was about 12. She wasn't my wife at the time, but she is obviously, but it was puppy love. She said no the first time I asked her to be my girlfriend, but I like the chase. So yeah, I grew up in a household that was, pretty rough, police coming through every other weekend for different reasons. And when I met Morgan when I was 12, that really helped me. It gave me an outlet. Her family then became my family. And I think I was just faced with adversity globally from the get. And I knew no different, right? And so growing up, as my father was in and out of prison, as my mother was chasing different boyfriends, I ended up getting dragged across the country with her. And I moved to 7 different states by the time I was in 5th grade, before I moved back to Battle Creek, Michigan, and stayed there ever since. And so I had this idea of what family really was, and I had this idea of what it meant to be a part of a family. And so fast forwarding a couple years, I had always used baseball as an escape myself to not have to go home and face what I inevitably knew was waiting for me. And so it was my escape. I used the weight room and in the baseball field, showing up early, staying after late, so I didn't have to face those things. And it worked out because I ended up getting out of high school, getting an opportunity to actually leave Battle Creek and go to play ball at Central Michigan University. And then was fortunate enough and worked hard enough to get an opportunity to play with the San Francisco Giants for a few years. But that whole time that I was in college and professional baseball, I was traveling the country and I was staying with different host families. And these host families, if you guys aren't familiar with it, I'm sure you are, but just in case your listeners aren't, a host family is basically somebody that acts as your family for a summer, like as an athlete, so that you can go travel to different cities and play sports without having to pay for like hotels and stuff. And so I realized, you guys, that my problems that I was facing of alcoholism and abuse and a broken home growing up weren't the problems that everyone else was facing, across the country. And I realized that the problems most people were facing was in regards to like lethargy and no energy, low self-esteem, no confidence, unhappiness, the same unhappiness that my parents were facing on the extreme end of problems, but people are experiencing these problems nonetheless, dealing with their health and their nutrition and their energy levels and becoming equally unhappy. And so I found a passion, and I found really selfishly a satisfaction for me staying in my host family's house and really being able to bring that positive, upbeat energy to them that I always had to have growing up, which eventually would become the foundation, even though I didn't know it in the moment, but the foundation for what Burn Boot Camp is built on. So yeah, just a global life of adversity growing up. And until I was about 15, I really thought it was just normal. And then once I found, quick story. I was forced to ride my bike to and from high school. And I would, I think you guys, I don't know if you're old enough, but do you remember the Sony Walkmans?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. We're old
so
enough.
Like my daughter is going to look at this or listen to this in like 10 years and be like, Dad, what's a Sony Walkman? Like, I don't even get it.
Classic.
But yes, I'm 31. I'm old enough to remember those and remember when I had one. And I used to pop in Personal Power by Tony Robbins and his CD-ROM. And I used to jam that on the way to and from school. And that was the first time that I realized, and it opened me up to realizing that there is more to life than the circumstances that you're placed in. And so from that moment on, I haven't had much adversity. I mean, micro adversities and micro failures, but I think I faced most of what was destined for me from the time I was 4 or 5 years old to the time I was 15.
So that's the first time the listeners will have heard that story. Obviously, I heard that story and read that story in my research. So I appreciate you going so deep into your past. Now, Alan and I, something that we firmly believe is your adversity is your advantage. So if you could go back in time, or looking back in time, do you think you would have ended up the same man you are today if you didn't have to go through such struggles?
That's a super interesting question. And the direct answer to that is absolutely not, but it's a choice that you make later in life. And so let me frame this up. It's not something as a 5, 6, 7-year-old kid that you get to decide, is this making me the person who I am? There's a lot of people out there who decide that in the same or worse situations than me, that those situations are the reasons why they can't do something, right? Like I grew up all my life and my parents told me that I was obese and overweight, and we're just big people, and we're going to be just big. You're just going to be a big person your whole life. And they never go back and give themselves the gift of redefining what those events meant to them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So like, I would say for my specific context, absolutely. Like I realized that in order for me to be the person that I would want to be, there's two things that had to happen. First and foremost, I would have to forgive my parents and for all of the things that they did wrong, but also thank them, for all of the things that they did right. Because if I didn't come to peace with the way that I was brought up, then I would always have this this inevitable dwelling that would happen within my own life, because you never get a chance to move on until you and decide to create this concrete meaning for the events that happen. And so instead of saying, well, my parents were drug addicts and my dad was in prison, so inevitably that's just what our family is and that's who we are, and, never questioning that for my entire life, I started questioning that when I was old enough to become conscious and 15, 16 years old, when I got a new perspective starting with Tony Robbins. And to answer your question though, like I think it's a decision, and I think it's a decision that individually we get to make every single day. That's in our control. That's in our choice. Your movie's not done until its final scene is over. And you're the editor, man, and you get to go back and you get to edit those scenes and you get to create a different spin on them. And yeah, it was shitty, like growing up. Sorry if I'm not supposed to swear, but it was
you
shitty.
can swear. You're good.
Oh, yeah, you're good.
It was shitty, and by any means, any context, it was shitty. But if I always moved through life saying, "Oh, poor me, I had a shitty upbringing," then there's no opportunity for me to use that as fuel. Like I remember the moments when I was pinned up against my wall, against my Michael Jordan poster in my basement, my dad hammered right after a sports game or something that I didn't do the greatest, and being, threatened and beaten and verbally abused and not fighting back. And like, I could let those moments shape the person I am in a negative way or a positive way. And that's under my control. And I didn't blame myself for being in those positions. I blamed my father, but here's the trick. You have to make sure that even though it's not your fault, it's your responsibility to fix it.
I love that you just said that. It's not your fault. So first of all, we resonate so strongly with everything you just said. I particularly resonate very, very strongly with especially that last part you just said. And I also grew up around a lot of pain, alcoholism, escapes, vices. So I wrote this quote recently that I'm now sort of realizing is huge for not only myself but other people. And I wrote that when you're in emotional pain, which is inevitable, you can do one of two things. You can either develop a virtue or escape into a vice. And which one we choose, I truly believe, forms our character and therefore the tapestry of how our lives turn out. So you went through a tremendous amount of adversity. As Kevin mentioned, we always say your adversity is your advantage, because if you make the choice to develop a virtue, it's the emotional training ground that will give you the emotional muscle to go do extraordinary things that ordinary people just simply cannot do. Why do you think that you chose to develop a virtue in terms of baseball and, putting in Tony Robbins and then having that influence versus escaping into a vice just like, your surroundings?
Well, I think you said it. I think the main motivator in anyone's decision-making process is the difference between pain and pleasure. Like you can use pain as a great motivator. Here, like I refused to do the things that my father and mother did because I refused to have the life like them. Like the pain that I experienced from like being innately disrespected growing up because who my parents were, like not being able to go over to my friend's house because I was the kid whose dad was in jail. Like those things, those were so painful to me at a young age. Like I used to sit in my room and cry about it as a kid because like it wasn't my fault. Like I couldn't do anything about it. I always knew that my intentions were pure and that I was a good person. And it was the pain that I experienced from those moments, and also on the other side of it, like the future pain that I would project, that if I went down that route that they went, where would I be in 5 years? Where would I be in 10 years? Where would I be in 20? Like, I don't want my kids to grow up on food stamps. I don't want them, I had to go to the lunch line, in Michigan, and hand the lunch lady food stamps in front of all my friends and be known as the poor kid. And like, I like, for me, money is a huge motivator, not for the, I guess, superficial reasons why a lot of people are motivated by money is to have material and nice things. But I want the freedom to be able to live life on my own terms, and be able to show my children that, look, your daddy did something that nobody else thought would ever be possible, and reshape this entire industry in the fitness culture. And it helps so many people with my story, and used my pain for other people's advantage. And so I think it goes back to like that word pain. In my case, sometimes it's pleasure in other people's cases, but for me, it was the pain of not ending up like my parents, and the pain that I felt from the way that they treated me when I was young.
So this is already turning out to be incredible. So thank you for going into that. So I also had, free lunch in high school, things like that. There's so many common denominators. As a matter of fact, one of our OG listeners, Amy, suggested you as a dream guest, and I'm not surprised.
Amy!
Because she's a client of mine, a one-on-one client, and she knows my past very, very deeply. In an effort to help her, I wanted her to be able to relate to some of the... Because again, some people see you or me or Kevin, and they think like, oh, maybe we had grown up with a silver spoon, so to speak, and it's just not the case. So I was talking to my fitness coach, actually, Nate Smithson, shout out to you, brother, recently, and I said, what makes the difference between whether or not someone chooses a vice versus a virtue? And I love the way you articulated that, but I also realized recently that I think inherently it comes down to self-belief. In other words, if you believed, which you clearly did, that your future could be brighter than your surroundings, therefore you're going to associate more pain to the vice than the virtue. So if someone doesn't believe in themselves and they don't have the self-esteem and the belief to believe that their future could be brighter, because in my darkest moments, that was the one place that I had to go. When everything was literally like life or death around me, situations, I had to go into the future. That's the one thing I've always had, a bright future. So what is your take on that? This can be kind of contemplative and back and forth, but like, what is your take on the fact that the main difference is believing that your future could be bright versus someone who maybe doesn't even think that they have one, therefore they just escape like their surroundings?
Well, I think it goes, the what pops in my head right away. The main point is that it's whatever your inputs are going to be your outputs. So if you're surrounded by people who are telling you that you can't, right, then self-awareness becomes your best friend, because you have to realize that people around you are bringing you down. And if you don't have self-awareness, then that's the precursor to having belief. Because if you're just believing people blindly, that's the biggest way to a life full of suffering and a life full of pain. Even in business, right? Like in business, if I'm just blindly listening to this franchise industry that's
Right.
An age-old industry, and they're just telling me what to do, and I march to the stepping orders and do it, then there's no way that I'm one of the fastest growing brands in the world right now. You know what I mean? So like you have to have the self-awareness before you can have the belief, and the beliefs ultimately comes from those around you. Like most people, and I think you may even be surprised yourself. I've traveled the world speaking with thousands of people, and you'd be surprised how many people are just really overwhelmingly hopeless. And it's a sad thing to say, but it's true. And it's because all they need is just someone in their life, just one person, right? That's why I love personal training. It's a low barrier of entry to encouragement. And that's all somebody needs, is to just be encouraged just a little bit. Like you have, like, I know that you're a trainer too, right? And so you get me, and we resonate this, but there's so many people out there who walk into our gyms and they're deconditioned. They're 300 plus pounds. They're over fat. Their body fat's at 40%, 50% body fat. And they walk in there day one, and they have no belief whatsoever. Their future, like you say, is like it's not a bright future for them. They're going there because someone told them they need to lose weight, right? And someone else is trying to make their plan for them. They're dragging their butt there because they want to appease somebody else. Well, when they step into the gym and that first interaction with them starts to install belief, right, and delete these old memory systems or these old belief systems that they came with, and right off the bat, we tell them you can't do it. We tell them you are good enough, you are beautiful enough, you are worth it, like you have the discipline, and you start just giving them a little of encouragement. I think it's simple, man. Like self-awareness, understanding who you should and shouldn't surround yourself with, and then making sure you're surrounding yourself with people that are encouraging you.
Devin, speaking of belief, so we talked a little bit in the preamble about this, but one of the things that I watched of you in my, what's the word I'm thinking of? Research, yes. In the research of you, I watched a video where you went to an underprivileged home for young men, and not only did you bring them Christmas gifts and food and dinner, but you stood around and you talked with them about, chasing their dreams and figuring out their dreams if they didn't have them. And one of the things you said was, I don't care if there's one person or two people in your life that believe in you, prove them right. Like, you have to prove the people that believe in you right. And then you offered them jobs and you were showing them workouts and stuff. And that resonated so highly with me because that's the person I want to be. I literally cried into my eggs, as I said in the preamble. So for you, somebody who didn't have that growing up, what is it like for you to be able to, like you said, install that belief in these kids who might not have it otherwise?
I think that's a great question. And thanks for watching the video, by the way. Shout
Absolutely.
out to my friends at Elon Homes. It's a group home for young boys in the Charlotte area who ended up in tough situations, right? Where the entire world is against them and nobody believes in them other than maybe a couple people at Elon, the teachers and the homekeepers at Elon, who are literally saving these children's lives, and they know it. And as I was approaching Elon Homes, it was around Christmas time. It wasn't about the gifts. It was more about, I thought, very, very keenly about the message that I wanted to deliver to these guys. And, I knew, because I was in their situation, that as soon as a white guy walks in that pulled up in an Escalade, that they're going to be like, oh, the rich, privileged white guy, right? Like, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Unrelatable.
So, yeah. And so I got up in front of them, and that's the first thing that I said. I was like, you guys think I'm just some rich white dude in a hat, like rolling in here in an Escalade, but let me tell you where I came from, And so I think that got their attention right away. And in order to influence somebody, you need to first be influenced, right? Like a lot of coaches or business professionals, like want to help somebody, but they've never ran a business, right? And it's really tough. It's really tough to be able to relate with somebody if you're not in their mind. And so when I started giving the speech, I looked over to my right side, and the gals who run the home were sitting there, and they were super intrigued, and I could read them, and their heads were nodding, and they were super engaged. And it just came to me like, these people are the only ones in this world that believe in you guys, right? Like you have these two people right here that are pouring into you day in and day out, that want to see you succeed. Don't let them down, right? Because most people, whether you are a 13-year-old boy who's disprivileged or a 45-year-old privileged person, you always have the opportunity to let yourself down without feeling that bad about it. Like, think about it. People want to beat themselves up because they lack the discipline or they lack the accountability. That's because they're not tying in multiple things that they care about in their life into the act or the activity. Like, I'll let myself down. Like, if I say, oh, I'm going to get up at 4 a.m., I might let myself down more often than if I tell somebody else, hey, I'm going to meet you at the gym at 4 a.m. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you're tying other purposes into your life. And so that's what I was really trying to do with those kids, is like, if you guys are only in this to go, a lot of them said, I want to get paid, I want to make money, I'm passionate about money. I'm like, okay, that's great. But there needs to be a deeper, more core level purpose rather than this surface level thing of just going out to make money. And so and I think anybody can take away from this, like, as you are setting your goals and as you're trying to build rituals and disciplines in your life that you know that you need to do to be successful, self-accountability is not going to work long term. You have to rope in your greater purpose. You got to rope in, like I talk about in my book, Stop Starting Over, your North Star. You got to rope in what you really want, why you want it, and who and how it's going to affect the people that you love in your life. Because we will do a lot more for the people that we love than we will do for ourselves, which is why children are so motivating to some goals. So that's what I meant with that point was don't let the people down that actually care for you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you are enjoying this episode featuring Mr. Devan Kline. Just a friendly reminder, the hyperconsciouspodcast.com is up live, and it has free content now. We're also adding stuff every day so we can bring you as much value as possible.
When you go to the website, you're going to get prompted to be on the mailing list. So we have 3 hyperconscious morning motivational minutes coming to you Monday, Wednesday, and Friday to kickstart your days off right. Remember, having awesome days lead to having an awesome year, which leads to having an awesome life. And definitely get on that mailing list as soon as possible.
Think we should get back into the episode?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, let's get back into the episode.
Talk to you soon.
Bye. I think you did an amazing job, and it was interesting because, like you said, when you walked in there, a couple of the kids just had their heads down. They weren't even paying attention. But as you spoke more and as you connected more, they really, really opened up, and they were making jokes, and it was really awesome to see, and it genuinely made me happy. So I was blown away by that.
Well, cool. Thanks for watching. Yeah, it's super fun. And I've been back a couple times since. I'm working on getting a group of the guys. We got a group text message going. I'm getting them. I got to get them some insurance, but I'm going to get them working on cleaning my HQ building and the parking lots and stuff at a couple of our buildings here in Charlotte. So
Hell yeah.
Trying to make sure that following through on your word is the definition of integrity to me. And I want to make sure that, those kids aren't let down.
My goodness, I like that, the definition of integrity right there. So, and that's the thing, too, to bring to the listeners with what you just said, following through on integrity is keeping your word, but also keeping your word to yourself. Self-integrity, right? That's huge. So I'm very big on the true north that you mentioned. And the listeners know this. I'm very big on having a why beyond yourself. Many of the uber successful, happy, healthy, productive guests that we have on this show, similar to yourself, Devan, there's a lot of common denominators. One of the common denominators is having usually a hero that really helps to role model. For you, it seems like it was Tony Robbins at the age of 15. I know you went to, Unleash the Power Within at least once, maybe multiple times. But another common denominator is that they are living for something greater than themselves. And I think that why power needs to be present in someone's life beyond just, I always say, if you're going to the gym to look good on the beach, you're not going to get there. It needs to be bigger than that. For me personally, the only reason why I was able to go from 160 pounds, skinny, fat, frail, drank too often and too much, to who I am today is because I connected it to a much deeper why. In other words, to inspire those I love and beyond. I think we all have this sort of vortex of influence, and the ripple effect of that is tremendous. And the more we grow, the bigger that vortex grows. So for you personally, and this is kind of somewhat of a selfish question because I want to learn how to instill belief in others more effectively. I'm able to do it really well one-on-one, but from the stage and I think from this podcast, I could do a better job. How do you help someone else believe in themselves?
That's a great question. Let me reverse to a couple of things that you mentioned that I just want to touch on. So first and foremost, so for everybody listening to this right now, okay, you mentioned that a lot of the guests that come on here who are successful, healthy, happy, wealthy people do similar things. Yes.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay. Then those listening that want to be healthy, happy, successful should probably listen to all the people that are healthy, happy, and successful if all of them are saying the same things. Okay. And modeling is a term that I want to use that I hope everybody can capture onto and hold on to, because I've literally used modeling other people to stand up on the intelligence, the wisdom, the business acumen, the philosophies of other people that have come long before me, compress their knowledge from decades and decades of their work into minutes or a podcast or a YouTube video, and then actually execute it on the stuff that they're talking about. Like, a lot of people call me an original thought leader, and I'm not that. Like, there's nothing, I've never created any thought, like, or original thought by any means. Here's what happens. You look at somebody that you'd like to desire to achieve something like them in the future, right? Whether it be their health, their happiness, their financial capabilities, their travel schedule, whatever it is. You reverse engineer what that person does on a daily basis. You don't just listen to it to get motivated. You listen to it and you go out and you emulate it right away. And as you emulate it, you're naturally going to weave in your own characteristics and your own personality into the emulation, which allows you then to take someone's entire life and compress it into yours. And then all of a sudden you become a byproduct of the 25 mentors, in my case, like, I would say 2 or 3 people that I really studied and understood. So I wanted to hit on that because that's one thing that people get misconceived about me. They're like, you're so, thoughtful, and like, okay, thank you for the compliment. And, I like to think of myself as an intelligent human being, but not this person who's making up thoughts out of midair. It's modeling and standing up and emulating on other successful people's shoulders. And then I wouldn't call them, just to correct you, because I do want to make sure that this I bring this home. I wouldn't call those people my heroes. I really wouldn't. I would call myself in 10 or 20 years, I would call that my hero, because I'm using everyone that I've studied to emulate, to make myself better. And if I'm constantly looking at myself in 10 years and visualizing myself being my own hero, just my future self, there's two reasons why that works. You always have to go back and study history and other people to continue to get there, which forces personal development. And you're never going to get there, which gives you something to chase constantly. So I just thought that I would throw that in there as you said that. But
I
does that make
appreciate
sense?
that. Yes, very much.
Yeah,
very much.
We always say that we have the cheat code a little bit because our job is to sit down and ask super successful people like, hey, by the way, how'd you get super successful?
Right.
And we want to help share that to the listeners. So even if it's the small steps, even if it's the beginning steps, even if it's building the belief, we're trying to pass that on. So I'm very grateful that you went and were so transparent there. Now, I want to talk a little bit about business because you have an incredibly successful business. So when you were 24, you were let go by the Giants and you had $600 left and you started your boot camp in a parking lot somewhere. And then within the next 6 years, you got up to $100 million in revenue.
Yeah, it's a crazy story, man. It really is. And
6 years,
I would be
seconds.
lying to you if I like started this parking lot boot camp and was like, I'm gonna dominate the world and change the face of the fitness culture and help people love themselves today all across the world. Like, I was after I got released by the Giants. By the way, you don't make very good money being in the minor leagues, okay? Despite how I guess nostalgic some people think like playing professional baseball is, I was on the struggle bus the entire time, living out of my duffel bag and going from hotel to hotel. So it's not glamorous, but nonetheless, do whatever it takes to chase your dream, right?
Yep, whatever it takes.
And so fast forward, I got released, which was at the time, one of the worst things that had ever happened to me, because every single ounce of energy and effort and every weight I lifted, every ball I threw from the time I was 5 years old to the time that I was 24 years old was with the goal of making the big leagues. And that didn't happen. And my dreams in the moment were crushed. But what I now realize is that sometimes in the moment when things seem like they're impossibly hard to overcome and you feel defeated, those are usually the moments that were supposed to happen to you in retrospect. And so now I look at it as the best thing that's ever happened to me because I get to make way more impact now than throwing a white ball across green grass in front of 60,000 people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I get to impact hundreds of thousands of people every single morning and every day. So it's I think in retrospect, the best thing that never happened to me was making the big leagues. But then I started the parking lot boot camp, man, and had a couple interim jobs there, like knew right away, like I'm not going to I was slinging DirecTV out of a Best Buy in Southwest Florida for a little bit. Like, that annoying guy that after you buy a $6,000 TV tries to upsell you on like a
Right.
$1,000 service. Like, I was that dude. Like, I was that dude. 200, like one yes for every 200 no's was good. Like 0.5% success rate was considered top of your class.
It's like Kevin's dating record.
That's better. Yeah, that's better than my dating record, honestly.
So, Devan, I want to go a little deeper on that. We've heard several times, and you mentioned pain and pleasure. When the pain is great enough, you'll make a change. Human beings don't want to be in pain. When you're in emotional pain, you'll change because your central nervous system associates pain with eventual death. So you were in a lot of pain when you got let go, and your dreams were, for tough vocabulary, crushed. Can you bring us there and put yourself back in that situation for the listeners? Like, how did you have the faith of a compelling future in what seemed so dire?
Yeah, no. So I when you're sitting in the locker room, I was in Scottsdale, Arizona, and you're sitting in the locker room during spring training. There's always this feeling in the air that somebody's going today, because every day in spring training, a couple guys off the entire organization get released. And so there's this tension that no one really talks about, yet when there's a certain gentleman that would walk in the room, and when that guy walks in the room, everyone gets quiet and all eyes on him, because he's going to go tell somebody in that locker room, hey, the bosses want to talk to you. AKA, you're getting fired today. So one day, as this guy comes in and this feeling is in the air, I just know he's coming for me. I can feel it. And so I try not to look. I tried to pretend like it was just going to pass, but tapped me on the shoulder. He said, hey, boss man wants to talk to you. Knew what's happening. Everybody, as you're walking out of the locker room, is looking at you like, sorry, bro. Like, because everybody's in the same position. Everyone has worked their ass off their entire life to get there. And so guys would cry as guys would walk out and everything, especially your best buddies. So I get in the room and they just respectfully say, hey, thanks for what you've done for the organization, but it's time, to part ways. And, if you'd like to pursue another team, we'll give you your activity report and you can give it to your agent. So I just didn't say much. Walked out, went back in the locker room, got my bag, took all my jerseys, all my memorabilia, stuffed it in my bag, went back to the hotel room, bro, and just like closed the door. Just it all came out. Like I started crying so hard, like little baby that's hungry hard, and it was a moment that I'll never forget. And I get chills when I talk about it, like sitting in that hotel room with my hands over my face, like ironically looking up in the mirror and seeing my Giants hat on was just a really hard and painful moment for me. And as you can imagine. And so they had scheduled me a flight back to Southwest Florida, where my girlfriend at the time, who's my wife now, Morgan, where she had moved and where I was going to spend the off season with. And on my way to the airport, I called her and I'm just like, babe, like, what do I do? Like, do I want to continue chasing this dream for 10 years? Like, ultimately it boiled down to us having the conversation saying, like, hey, what do you want out of your life? Like, and I told her, I was like, I want, no matter what I do, I want at least the fair opportunity to be the absolute best in the world at it. And she said, do you think that's baseball? And I thought about all these guys like Mariano Rivera and Derek Jeter. And, I'm like, no, like, let's be self-aware, right? Going back to that, self-awareness is the key. No, I believe in myself, but I'm not going to blindly believe I'm not the Michael Jordan of baseball, right? I'm not the Clayton Kershaw here. And the talent wasn't there. And so what Morgan told me on that phone, I'll never forget it. And it's my motto still to this day. She was just like, well, whatever you're doing, you've always given yourself the opportunity to be the best in the world at it. And you've failed a couple times, but whatever you're doing, you just got to keep moving. And that term keep moving has always stuck with me. And it still does to this day. That's actually the theme of our entire organization is keep moving. And that encompasses so many things. And can relate to so many people on different levels. And I was always able to relate with my clients. I've trained personally 20,000 women and gentlemen. and hundreds of thousands of more through the Burn Bootcamp brand. But I was never really overweight. I never struggled with that side of emotional stress, but I could always relate back to the failures that I had in my life and how I overcame them. One of the biggest ones ever being getting released from the Giants.
Devan, I truly think that, unfortunately, most people that are in relationships aren't as happy as they portray. They're not as happy as their social media shows. And that's a hard conversation to have with yourself. But it seems like you and Morgan are genuinely happy. What is it like to have somebody that you know is on your team, that you know is ride or die, that you know has your best interests, at heart? Like, what is that like to have her along for this ride?
It's incredible. I definitely would not be in this position if, Morgan was not here. If you think about just the story that we've talked about today, when I was 12 and I met her, we started dating, if you want to call it that. And then throughout high school, as I was going through what I was going through at home, she was the person, she was my rock. She was always the person that I could lean on. When we went separate ways in college, she would go out of her way to come visit me and come to my games. When I got released from the Giants, she's the first one that was there for me to give me that perspective. Morgan is she's the sane to my insane. she's the detail to my vision. And I'm a pretty unreasonable person, which means I'm pretty stubborn in context of like the goals that I have and the dreams that I have. And Morgan is too, but she also, I can go too far sometimes with it, and she always is there to kind of bring me back down to earth. Just because I'm so passionate about what we're doing, and I think that the most audacious people with the most absurd goals are the only ones that have the opportunity to change the world when no one else thinks you can do it, and you're the only one that thinks you can do it, and you're stubborn in that regard. I think that that's a incredible recipe to have as a leader, as long as you have empathy wrapped into that for the people that you're leading. And so Morgan has always been that empathy for me, and she's really rubbed off on me in that regard. I have not always been an empathetic person, and I would say that because of her, she's given me that skill set just through being around her and feeling her energy constantly. She cares so deeply for people. She doesn't try to make things better when problems go wrong. She's just there for people, and if through her Coffee and Kettlebells podcast, that is amazing. She just reached 200,000 downloads in like her first 6 months or something like that.
Yes.
Congratulations, Morgan.
Yeah, she's killing it. You'll see that about her. And so she's always been that person that's been there for me. So now today, we have children together, and we have this incredible story of being sweethearts and how she's pulled me through the tough times. And we just have this bond that no matter what can't be broken. And as a couple, and as think of the dynamics behind running $100 million organization and being a couple, right? Like
Yep.
You, as the CEO and COO, I can pick up my phone right after this podcast and I'll have 13 problems to deal with right now. And so will she, but we have done an amazing job of what we call it. We call it our family force field. And we have this imaginary force field around our family that only lets certain things in and keeps certain things in and shields negativity and shields disbelief out. Because no matter how much good you try to do in this world, there's always going to be something that attacks it that's negative.
Oh, yeah.
And it's your choice. And the negativity speaks, by the way, a lot louder than positivity. For every one negative person, there's 2,000 positive people, but that one person tends to have a louder voice because people are looking for something external to relate with that they can blame their problems on. So we've created this force field, and it's been a good concept for us. And with that, we also have this work-life harmony concept or work-life integration, where we don't try to separate work and home because it's what we're passionate about. It's what we love. And we try to teach any couples who are dispassionate about what they're doing for a living to, try to work overtime to get into something that they are passionate about, so that there isn't any tension at home. Because let's be honest, most people don't like their jobs, right?
Yeah, unfortunately.
So for the listeners, there's a lot of different things that jumped off the page there. I always kind of say that number one, the people who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones who do. So I love that you said the word audacious. I call them big, hairy, audacious goals. Actually, one of my heroes, Darren Hardy, calls them that, and I just
stole it.
Yeah,
repurposed.
Yeah.
I call it modeling or emulating.
Exactly. Like you, I stand on the shoulders of giants.
I gotta sass him a little bit though, Devin. I gotta sass him a little bit, you know?
So
that's good.
Right.
Keep him in check, right?
Yeah.
Well, he got to bring me down to earth sometimes too. So, one of the things that I notice about you is that you always want to be the best at what you do. You seem very mastery driven. And that can be being a father, that can be being a husband, clearly. You wouldn't have, been in this family force field for as long as you have if you didn't want to be better. And so there's this quote that I wanted to bring to the listeners that I keep very near and dear to my heart that I think will resonate with you, Devin. It's by Brian Tracy. He said, "If you do not love what you do enough to want to be the best at it, then get out of it like you would a burning building." So you clearly love your wife dearly. You clearly love your career dearly. And what I want to bring to the listeners is that think about how much he loves the things in his life. There's a direct correlation between how hard you are willing to work and how much you love the people, and the business in your life. And so if you're out there right now and you're a listener and you don't love what you do, like enough to want to be the best at it. And by the way, there really is no barometer of being the best at something. Like I want to be the greatest public speaker and educator to ever live, right? Do I ever really get there? And by the way, if I do I even know? The point is that it's an ambition that is always beyond my grasp, and that's what makes me better every day. So, what are your thoughts on something that you're doing differently in terms of your own personal philosophy versus someone who maybe isn't as happy, healthy, and productive?
That's a great question. So I think that a lot of people will they'll blindly they'll blindly take advice, and I think that we are, as cliche as it sounds, the architects of our own life. If you have ever listened to a man by the name of Jim Rohn, who was a founding father, one of the founding fathers of personal development, for those who don't know.
Yes. All our listeners know Jim Rohn for sure. I quote him all the time.
Awesome. So you might have quoted this before, but he says, you're going to be somewhere in 5 years. The question is where. And what that means is that 5 years can either go by without you questioning why. Most people say it is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. What does that mean?
You can go 5 years with never questioning it is what it is, or you can visualize your perfect day in 5 years. What does that day look like in 5 years from today? What are you going to be wearing? What success will you have had? What's your relationship's going to look like? What's in your bank account? Where are you living? Like you can visualize that perfect day for 5 years from now, and you can work backwards to design the life that you want to live. And I think what most people don't do that I do extremely well, two things. If I hear something and I think it's going to work for my life, I don't just hear it. I hear it and I execute immediately. I can execute with the best in the world. The second thing I do is I have a very, very, very clear vision of what I want to tell my grandchildren when I'm 85 years old in a rocking chair. And the only thing that I'm fearful of in this life is regret, and I'm freaking deathly afraid of it. I think about it all the time. Like any decision that I have, I'm like, am I going to regret this in 20 years? Like that is like the risk management system to my life is, if I'm 85 sitting in a rocking chair and my grandchildren ask me what I regret, what am I going to tell them? And it allows you to put in perspective the problems that you think that you have on a daily basis, to see the problems as what they are. And another Jim Rohn quote, he says, most people major in minor things, right?
Oh, yeah.
And most people do. Most people's problems are blown up in context so that they have something to talk about, right? Like I really think that the recipe to designing your life and not just ending up somewhere in 5 years, but actually designing it, is to have what you want done inside of you, mentally and physically done. It's like a blueprint to a building, right? Like you can stand in front of a skyscraper and the building can already be done on paper. It can already have the plans picked out. It can already have the furniture, the carpet, each floor, the color of the exterior. The building can already be done. It just takes time to build the building and make it, for it to come to physical manifestation of actual touch and feel reality. And what I've been able to do, I think, with the best in the world is design a life for myself similar to a skyscraper that doesn't exist yet. Very acutely, very refined, very detailed. Most people will just say, hey, I want to make some more money. Okay, here's $5, get lost. Or, hey, I want to lose some weight. Okay, chop off your right arm, and you just lost weight. Now you can move on with your life. You know what I mean? Like, if you get specific with the goals, like get clear on exactly what you want, why you want it. You say your true north, right? People got to get clear on what they want and why they want it, and then they have to put those things in a forecasted nature in the future to like write down exactly what they want. I'm looking at my notebook right now, and every year I do this exercise and I write it. There's about 5 pages that I write around the first week of January that what does my life look like when I'm 80? What will I have built? And I asked myself that question, and it's so detailed, and it's like down to like the brand of sunglasses I'm wearing on a certain beach in the world, like it gets very specific. So
I'm glad you went there, Devan. We literally, so for the listeners that are listening to this episode, we already dropped the episode that is reverse engineering regret. So we literally sat down, we made 3 columns and figured out what we wouldn't regret, what we might regret, and what we would definitely regret. And we went through the list, and it's really, really eye-opening to realize, like, if I don't do this thing in 80 years, I'm going to look back and say, like, oh, you really, really screwed up. So I'm glad you went there.
Yeah, man, just be afraid. Don't be afraid of failure in the moment. Don't be afraid of the way people are going to look at you if you fail. Like, so many people were like, dude, what the hell are you doing?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
you're going to go build this. You think you're going to build this huge brand? Like, okay, good luck. Right. Like, as I'm a 24-year-old kid in a parking lot with like, not even my own building yet. I'm telling people this.
Right.
And, and then now they're asking me how are you doing it?
Of course.
I have that exact same story with my fitness journey, Devan. I want to bring something to you. I actually started to use that as a barometer. And you'll resonate with this quote. The amount of closed-minded people in your life that kind of give you negativity when you're chasing your dreams is an actual barometer of how close you are to achieving them. Like,
yeah, I love that.
Dude, like, I resonate so strongly. So we're running out of time here. Kevin's kind of like
I'm
nudging
giving him
me.
the look.
Yeah, right.
Give him the 5-second countdown.
I'm giving him the look, like, yo, wrap this up.
Right, exactly. We have 2 questions that we ask every guest that we're going to get to in a second. But one thing I want to bring to the listeners is that all good things start with clarity. If you don't know what you want in this life, you're not going to ever get it. And even if you did get it, you wouldn't know that you got it. Right? So the reverse engineering regret thing, and also, Devan, if you haven't read the book, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying by Bronnie Ware, it's my dream to one day get her on this show, Kevin and I's dream. I have a flashcard in my pocket with the top 5 regrets. She interviewed the terminally ill. She took care of them, and she realized there was very common patterns. The number 1 was, I wish I had lived a life true to myself and not what others expected of me. So that's a very big theme on this podcast, and it's unbelievable that you just went there. So I think now we're going to get to our last 2 questions.
Yes, so we're going to hammer our last 2 questions. That way you can plug away and we don't take up the rest of your day/week, because we could do this forever, I feel like. So every guest that we've had on, we have, this is what, 110? Episode number 110?
111.
111, my goodness. One question I always like to ask, and it's because when I figured out what I wanted to accomplish before I died, my whole life changed. So what do you hope to accomplish before you die with this miracle of life you've been given?
Admiration.
Look at that. Hammered it.
One word. That's your one word. Evan Carmichael would love you.
Yeah, right?
He wrote a book called Your One Word. Do you know Evan? He's the top 10
I know that
principles of success
I
guy.
heard of his name. He's a YouTuber, right? Like he
Right.
does like YouTube motivationals. Yeah, I've heard of him.
He's a good dude. He's a great dude.
Devin, this kind of pains me because I have so many questions I want to ask you, but I'm going to ask you the question that I always ask the guests. So I wear a necklace / chain around my neck.
Bling bling.
Necklace, if you want to call me soft. And it has the true north on it, the North Star. And that's the one star in the sky that's always the brightest. It never moves. It never changes. It's unwavering. As you're into personal development, obviously all the listeners are, because this is a personal development podcast. We grow, we evolve, we change. And we're proactive about that because we're self-aware and hyper-conscious. But I do believe the deepest part of us never changes. And I think that's something beyond this life. What about you never changed?
I think the desire to leave a legacy that I'm proud of is the constant. And then underneath that, I think the two things over as I've created a family and grown this business has changed. I think in order to leave a legacy, you need to impact people, but I've gotten more clarity as we've moved forward in this brand. And I think the legacy the legacy that I will leave behind for myself is the person who brought a team of superheroes together that showed people that loving themselves for who they are today is possible. And without doing so, you can't be excited to have a bright future tomorrow. And then that's professionally. And I'll do that through, if we had 2 hours, I could tell you all of the ways that I'm going to do that through. But I'll say that the main one right now is we're committed to over the next 10 years, and we have a game plan to open 10,000 BurnBootCamp locations across the world. So that'll be the main avenue there. Secondly, I refuse to have my children experience the pain that I experienced growing up. And that'll be my legacy for my family and for my profession.
So the answer you just gave is interesting to me because for the listeners, I don't believe you attract in your life what you want necessarily, but who you are, which is why I'm such a firm believer in personal development. Amy suggested you as a dream guest, and Amy resonates very, very strongly with me as my one-on-one client. And it's not surprising to me that legacy is your thing. That's my thing as well. There's so much here. You also said the superhero thing. Don't go back and watch it, folks, because it's my first YouTube video ever, and it's terrible, but it's called Real Life Superheroes. I did 7 videos, and it's about how we all have a unique gift to give to the world. Devin, this has been unbelievable. Kevin's nudging me again, so he wants to let you plug away.
Yes, you survived the hyperconscious gauntlet.
Yeah.
Now plug away where people can find you, where they can go to Burn Boot Camp, where they can buy your book, all the happy stuff.
Yeah, the longest form content that I have right now, my podcast comes out 3 times a week. It's called the Devan Kline Podcast. It ranges from health, fitness, psychology, business. It's just what I like to talk about. Honestly, it's a place where people can come if they want to learn, if they want to grow. Most all of the concepts are applicable to those different areas and most areas of life. Other than that, I'm really active on Instagram, and we have YouTube channel, Facebook channel. But listen to the podcast if you want to know more. If you guys liked what you heard today, and from there we can hopefully this little group here can hyperconscious Burn Bootcamp and Devan Kline can all make sure that we take care of you.
I can definitely vouch for the podcast. I was listening to it today, so you will get a lot of what you got today, but also different thing. Like, you're very good about business. We didn't get into it because we were asking so many deep questions, but I can definitely vouch for the podcast.
Cool, man. Well, thanks guys for having me on. I appreciate it. Appreciate the time. Love what you guys are doing. Big ups to you. And for everybody out there listening, you follow these guys. Make sure you stick with them because they're doing some great things.
Oh, we appreciate that more than you know, Devin.
Thank you, Devin. We really appreciate that, man. I hope our paths cross soon. We will set an intention to get a round 2 in person at some point, and we appreciate you coming on the show, man. This was great.
Right on, y'all. Keep moving.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Devan Kline. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for listening to another episode of the Hyper Conscious Podcast.
Going hyperconscious will absolutely change your life, because if you understand why something is the way it is, now you have the power to change it. If you going hyperconscious with us has changed your life in any way, please share this episode with one of your friends, because the more people that go hyperconscious, the better this world's going to be for everybody.
And if you would kindly leave us a 5-star review on iTunes, that would help us make more people hyperconscious, and we would be greatly appreciative.
Thank you.
Bye.